that worked.
I've muted it. I've muted it. That was all I needed to do. I couldn't mute it beforehand. So.
Okay, good evening. I think we're ready to go with all the clattering and banging going on behind the scenes over at this end. I'm sure we must be there by now. Good evening and very welcome to this. I think this is the last of my actual interviews over this couple of weeks of No Nam live streams that I've been doing. And tonight we have Philip MJ Taysom from Modal Electronics. Modal Electronics, famous.
I think only my bank manager calls me Philip MJ Taysom. That's really scary, actually.
Well, it's one of those weird things where whenever I Googled for you, it would always come up with your full name. So I just assumed it was like, that's just how you like to be addressed, you know. And obviously in the future, it will be Lord Philip MJ Taysom. OBE. Anyway, he's an unruly... He's an unruly guest, and we're going to talk about synthesizers and stuff. I've even got one out over here. That one. I can never point in the right direction.
It's nice to see you.
So, without further ado, I'll bring you onto the screen, sir, and we'll chat about stuff. There you are.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Just warming up. You know, it's nice. I feel like I've got the hang of this again. It's just when I get the hang of doing all this nonsense that it's over again for another few months, and then I'll do it again. But anyway, yes, no, it's good. It's good to be here. It's good to meet you. I don't think we've run into each other on purpose at any other thing up to this point.
You know a few mutual people like sort of Paul Gilby and Rupert Faff and just bits and bits. I think that we've crossed paths in time. But no, it's a pleasure to meet you. And I have to say, I'm really worried I won't be able to be as exciting a guest as Steve Davis. I loved watching that episode. I thought that was brilliant. It was everything about what I love about what we do. So it was fun, and I'm here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. He's a weird. I don't mean weird. Yes, I do. Weirdly inspirational guy. You know, unexpectedly so. He's forever pushing the idea of being a musician with Modular, where the rest of us we're just fiddling about with no purpose or any direction, and he's ploughing on, going, no, I'm going to do this gig, and then I'm going to do this, and then you need that for this, and let's get together and jam, and it's all very exciting.
I think that's really great. I mean, obviously he's had a lifetime of performing in front of people, and
yes,
okay, with a different kind of art, but the courage to get up. I mean, I actually have to give a presentation in Sweden next week, and I've got to play in front of probably like 25 people. I'm thinking, I haven't done this since I was a kid, and I hate it. I'm terrible playing live. I really am. If I'm actually in my own, I love it, but when I'm in front of people. So I think it's great that, dare I say it, especially someone at his age, is getting out there and performing. And I think that's what's so exciting about what we do and what we play with these. You can get out there and do things, and it's exciting. But it was a great interview. It's a really good, fun episode, that one.
Yeah, thank you. It was good. Yeah, it was very good. So I don't know where to go from there. Should we call it a night?
Yeah, pubs are open. A couple of hours left. You know, it's probably far more interesting. Everyone go home and just enjoy your beer.
So all right.
Where would you go? The world is your oyster.
Yes. Let's get my... let's get this out of the way first. See, Stephen, who I was talking to last night, Noati Blank V, he's very enamoured with the 002. Bless
Thank
him.
You. It's a very beautiful thing. I'm very proud of it.
Yeah. Well, tell us about it. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about Modal until more recent times. I mean, I've seen you knocking around at shows and stuff. But the 002, was that your second product? Could I have a guess at that?
That's an interesting one. So kind of, but not really. If I start talking too much, just say shut up, Tasty.
That's all right.
And everyone I work with does. So I played an MS-10 when I was about 10 years old in 1934 or whatever that was. I'm that old. And I was blown away. I was a flute player and a piano player and appalling at both. And suddenly here was this thing that combined my love of electronics. And I was, as a kid, I was really, I used to, I've got some great pictures. My father was madly into his hi-fi. And I took out these glass thingies from his, what I now realise would be worth £3,000 Leek amplifiers, and used to smash them. It was great fun. But as a kid, and I had a spaceship which was on a wooden box, and it was one of his garage transcription table turntables. So I've been around audio all my life, ever since I was a kid, and fascinated by electronics. Anyway, played an MS-10, I was blown away, and it was an addiction that just never went away. As you do, you sort of go through more and more extreme hairstyles and more strange clothes styles as you become an adolescent. And I remember vividly buying my first synth, which was a Roland SH3A. And I paid 50 quid for it, and that was an immense amount of money. But I mean, 50 quid for a synth in 80, whatever that was, 82, 83, was peanuts, because of course the DX7 which was then king, a lot more money. And I used to carry that synth with me literally everywhere. I would go on the bus and an SH3A is not light, but it has a handle built in, so I carry that everywhere. And it was a passion that just stayed. And as all of us as synth players do, you get a little more cash and you buy a little more gear, and then you need some cash, so you sell some gear, and stuff comes and goes. Anyway, I was very lucky in my career to be able to learn a lot about electronics and a little bit about manufacturing. And I built a studio up in Yorkshire, where I lived at the time. And a mate of mine who sadly was killed, he said, why don't you buy a Mini Moog? You've always wanted a Mini Moog. Yeah, that's a really good idea. So I bought the Mini Moog, and it was, I think, 650 quid. Yeah, those were the days. Then I saw an advert for a PPG Wave, and I thought, oh, yeah, I've always, that's the love it. Wave 2, and then 2-3 followed, and then a Wave Term, and then an EVU, and then a PRKFD, and then the most bizarre. This is the early 2000s, very literally 2000, when eBay had just started.
Yeah,
and you sit on eBay, and also Venia, and Pete Forrest has run an amazing auction site with that for many years. Oh, hang on, there's a Fairlight. Oh God, and the Fairlights in those days were, for a Series 2, I don't know, 1,500 quid.
that's
as
crazy.
a school kid, well, as a segue, as a kid, I mean, I was literally, I think it was my second job, and I was earning £4,000 a year. So I think my take home would have been about 300 quid. I saved up 2 months' money to have a night lock in at Paradise Studios in Chiswick. And Paradise was called Paradise because they had a Lin LM2, a Fairlight Series 2, a PPG Wave, and Wave Term, and it was JP8, and it was stuff I could never even dream of seeing. I mean, I'm probably ranting. Apologies, I'm waffling too much. I used to get on the bus, go down to Dunlop Smiths, and get Sound on Sound or ENMN, of course, beforehand.
Yeah.
When Paul and Ian were running that, and I would look through all the gear, and it was just such an exciting time. Anyway, build a studio. And met this amazing guy called Paul Maddox, who had designed a thing called the Monowave, which is there's one of them there. And Monowave was Paul had, I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, not been very well, and had taken his love of electronics and developed an NCO oscillator, and bolted it to a ladder filter, a transistor ladder filter, and produced sounds that no PPG could ever make. The filter was infinitely more interesting. And it was a really beautiful little instrument. Anyway, we said, let's make a synth company. And then everyone started buying soft synths, and Carillion were making lots of PCs. And I remember having a Pro Tools HD system that had, I don't know, 54 instantiations of Access Virus Indigo on it. And the world wasn't wanting hardware synths. So that sort of killed our idea. But again, in 2013, we came back to that idea, really because there was nothing sexy to go and buy. There was nothing that made me go, oh, wow, yeah, I'd love that instrument. And in building this lovely studio in Yorkshire, you go and buy, I had very lucky to have an Alka Synthex. Beautiful instrument, but it doesn't really sound like you think a Synthex sounds until you put it through a phaser. And they go, I recognize that sound. So I wanted to create an instrument that had the power of a workstation, multi-timbrality, multi-track, computer control, ease of use, and modern computer technology things. And so we wanted to build that, but use a very traditional voice engine. And that's how 002 came about. In fact, 002 was going to be a monophonic synth. I've probably told this story and bored a lot of people, but we had a brainstorming session, as you did in the 2000s, at a hotel in Bristol. And I think I called Paula at about 2 in the morning. It's got to be polyphonic. And that's how 002 came about. And we started the project in July 2013 and spent an awful lot of money. And something that's not really often understood is that in the days of Alan Perlman or Bob Moog, one guy generally sat down and made the instrument. I mean, they even cut the wood for the case. But these days, an instrument like 002 has 400,000 lines of code inside it. That's not one guy's effort. So you've got a team of people who are working on the electrical, mechanical safety testing. You've got a team working on EMC compliance testing. You've got a team working on the PCBA setup. You've got a team working on mechanicals and the metalwork, packaging. If you send these things from here, and this thing weighs 13 kilos, you send that, you can't just put it in any old piece of cardboard. So you have actually a big team came together, but we delivered the first 002s. We announced it in June 2014. And that was quite an unusual thing for a team of people to sit down and in less than a year bring this thing to life. And I'm very proud that I still work with. Very good question. I'll answer that for you in a second. Most of the people who are in that team still work with us, and I'm really honoured to work with them. It's a great joy every day. Why do we change it? Yeah, there are 50, I think, Moduluses out there. It's a legal thing. When we started, Paul had, in fact, I actually got copies of them. Paul back in 1990s produced Paula. If I say Paul, please forgive me. It's because at that time, Paul was Paul. So I'm 50s. I'm old and I get confused.
No, we understand. We understand the historical references.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, I did get accused the other day of not doing it. It wasn't intentional. It's just that then was history.
Yes.
But Paula then ran a brilliant little e-zine called the Modulus e-zine, and it was basically what's new in circuits and synth and cool stuff. And Paul then called this the Modulus Monowave. And so it was pretty logical to continue the business, actually incorporate as Modulus. I mean, Paula had done this from home in very cottage industry style. And so, we incorporated as Modulus. There was a lovely bass guitar company called Modulus, whose USP was they produced graphite-necked basses. And if you play bass, it really is just a joy. They're bloody heavy, but they're great fun to play. Anyway, they had collapsed, unfortunately, and gone out of business. And we tried to acquire the trademark that they had. And even though their trademark was in guitars, the lawyers advised us that it was a bit too close, musical instruments. Anyway, they had gone out of business. We couldn't buy it, and so we'll proceed anyway. And then about 6 months later, we got a letter saying, hello, we've got the trademark and we'd like you to stop using the name Modulus, please. And we had an awful meeting. It was a really, really horrible meeting, sitting around the table. Everyone think of a word that begins with M. And there were some just really ridiculous names like Mocha. And anyway, a modulus is a form of a modal calculation.
Okay, good. Yeah, like the reference. Yeah.
Clues. And that's why. And actually, the funny thing is that when you make a change, and that's quite a big thing, changing a company's name, especially sort of in its first year, then it's not something you do lightly. But actually, living with it now for God, how many years? 2015, we changed the name, so 7 years. Actually, it's prefer it. James, I'm really sorry. We're struggling with the control of the variable resistors. They're just not working properly. So the toast. I'm sorry, but the color level. I don't know whether anyone saw James Dyson, who's just commented his toaster video. It was a fun thing, James. But anyway, so that's the history of the 002. If anyone's still listening, that's a miracle.
No, that's awesome. I mean, it tells us all about kind of the history of where you came from. I mean, in that time between 2000 and 2013, was the studio working? I mean, was that running a living?
No. That's a really interesting question, and apologies if it's a long answer again, but I built the studio up and actually became really disenchanted and not lost interest in music, because that's everything to me, but lost interest certainly in technology and music. I think there was some very bad synths in that era that didn't really make a lot of sense, and just became very disincentivized about the whole synthesizer scene. And this is all before Eurorack. This is before Eurorack really drove a lot of interest and growth and technology and fun.
Yes.
No, the studio, I sold off most of the bits, and was just busy with other things. Life takes over, and I think probably everyone who's watching can relate to that. We do something and then life takes over, and that'd be interesting with a graphite neck, dangerous. So that's why the studio got sold off and did a mothball. There were some bits that left in storage and stuff, but and creating music definitely took a back seat. There's no question. And actually, I was busy with a company, and we sold out of that company, and actually then thought, go back to music, and that was why the whole modal thing in 2013 came about. The passion never went away. The itch to go and actually make an instrument the way we wanted it to be. I think that what defines a great synth is whether it's an instrument, not a piece of technology. I mean, you can get, but there's some amazing technology out there. But it's when you sit down and you lose 2 hours and go, bloody hell, where's that time gone? Because you've just gone on a journey, wherever that journey may be. And that's what brought me back to doing what we do.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's interesting stories to hear about the noughties in terms of synthesizers, because from 2000 to 2010, let's say, let's make it a decade, that was when software was king. And all the exciting things were happening in software, in disk streaming, in sampling, in VSTIs. We all assumed, I mean, I was building flipping Carillon audio systems. I was, shipping out studios in a computer box to studios around the world. And it was absolutely seemed to be the way forward. If you ran out of CPU speed or whatever, you'd get 2, you'd network them up, you'd get 3. And the possibilities were limitless. The sound palette was enormous. We stuck 8 of them in Hans Zimmer's studio, all these kinds of things. And there was no space for hardware. And in terms of hardware, since I remember I was working at Turnkey at the time, I can't really remember anything that was worth fiddling with. JP8000 maybe.
There was one notable, amazing, and Axel's Neuron was utterly genius.
Yes.
Because he and Stefan decided to step completely away and produce something that was different. And I was really, really upset that didn't work out for them, because I thought that the synth was a great synth. I think I had serial number 12 or 13, something like that, delivered, and I really, really loved it. I remember they had a lot of teething problems. I remember having to upgrade the RAM because it basically was an AMD 486 clone inside a case. But it was a really brave thing to do. I think, for anyone watching, I'm not sure what business you may be in or what you may do, but if you think about starting something from scratch, going from nothing at all to a company to then, as Axel did, producing instruments sold all around the world, it's really, really challenging. And,
yes.
I think that to me, of that noughties period, was the absolute pinnacle and the best instrument that came out in that time. The V-Synth also was a nice idea, and I remember where it did. And the other one I loved was the Korg Karma. which I really, really enjoyed my Korg Karma. It was a Triton with a very clever arpeggiator, but boy, it was
Right.
fun. But yeah, I think there were some. But you're absolutely right. When you start to see sort of Vienna ensemble running on 4 computers or 8 computers and stuff, the problem I had, and this is why the hardware versus software thing for me will always be a really simple case.
Right.
I had a Pro Tools HD rig with several stuff on, but you'd spend more time trying to optimize the bloody computer
Mm.
and actually solve the problems than you
Yeah,
would
but
sitting down and saying, "Oh,
that's why you
music."
needed a Caroline, you see, because we would have done all that for you. Or later on, a Rain computer or a Molten computer, even in more recent times, although those have now gone.
No, I mean the point I'm making is that when you get down, you switch a keyboard on, you start to play, and you write something.
Yeah.
And if I can give my own perspective on this, the Synclavier was the finest sample-based instrument I've ever played in my life. Not because it was a Synclavier and it sounded amazing, but because you turned it on, you pressed one of the red buttons, and you loaded a sample, and you played. And then you press the next one to do the next one. There was no click, drop-down menu, hang on,
Yeah.
drag, create. Well, that wasn't how it was. So I think that for me, I'm sorry, I'm a hardware freak.
Mm. That's okay. I mean, that's honestly okay. I mean, the interesting thing you said earlier about it having to be an instrument. I mean, that was the biggest challenge with the computer interface, was how do you make that an instrument? I mean, you ended up focusing all of your creativity through the point of a mouse, for heaven's sake, and then you were sort of stuck with what ended up being cheap plastic controllers to try to be your interface to this thing. You know, a mouse and a cheap controller does not replicate the hardware experience of playing a Mini Moog or playing any kind of hardware built instrument. It just can't do it. It has its advantages, of course, of having this limitless potentially palette, but that's only an advantage as far as it goes, I find.
I've got another perspective, if I may, on that, which
Yeah,
is
go
that
for it.
most kids have a phone or an iPad these days or an Android tablet. And for not a lot of money, they can carry 100 times more creative power than I had when I was a kid.
Mm.
And I think that's a good thing. I think it's an amazing thing. And if it means that we get more people making music and it gets more people interested in the process of music, it's a great thing, in my opinion. Does it appeal to me personally? No, because I love the connection. I during lockdown decided to start and finally actually learn guitar. And the interaction of just being able to sit down and pick a guitar up off the rack and just play it is an immediacy, is a creativity that you can't get with an app on an iPad or a phone. But you can produce this. I mean, the guys at Geosynth and the Geoshred stuff's phenomenal. It's all fun. You plug it in with an MPE controller and it's brilliant. But I think that the role of hardware, what we do as people, by being interested in electronic music, we're interested in releasing a creative itch that's inside us.
Yes.
And whatever helps you do that is great. And if that's an app and it's something, I used to fly a lot for work and sit on a lot of planes, and just having the ability to sit and play something on Geoshred or on Pete Vogel's wonderful Fell app on the iPad is far more interesting. Don't really play computer games, so it's much more interesting. And I think that the technology is great. But yeah, if it means a whole generation, I mean, particularly lockdown as well, has hit musicians incredibly hard. And so if it means that more people can make music because they have got a plastic controller and a mouse and an app, that's a good thing. But I think that what we found with the Craft Synth 1, which we launched, and then the Craft Synth 2, and still find with things like the Sculpt, a lot of people buy those instruments because it's their first step into hardware. So they've been used to an app, and the Modal app, which we produce as a very tightly integrated thing within our products, means that people who are used to software are quite comfortable in the transition to hardware. And so, yeah, I think it's a really. 2022 is an exciting time to be alive in technology.
It is. It is. I
Yeah.
mean, one of the things that interests, I mean, one of the things that interests me about Modal is the meshing you have of technology. That's, that's why I'm sort of talking about software a bit as well, because your synths are very much a hardware and software partnership. When you talk about, actually, we talk about the Neutron and it being run on a computer inside.
Neuron, yeah, brilliant.
Yes, that's right. Sorry, big pardon. Got the wrong one there. But that idea does carry through your synths. I mean, things have become more elegant now. We have microprocessors which are a bit more designed. You don't have to be cramming a PC inside a keyboard anymore. We can now have, properly tailored little small things which do all that business for us. But there's still very much this software hardware blend going on in your synths, which I think is very, very interesting. Was it a conscious decision, or did it just that seem to be how it went?
Absolutely conscious, totally, completely, utterly. And I come back to a comment about PPG, which for me is musically my passion as instruments. I think I was very lucky to own a lot of what Wolfgang Parr made, and I remember vividly playing with the Waveturn with the Wave 2.2 in those days with the A, and you found that you had the keyboard in front of you with its fairly limited control panel, but you plugged in the Waveturn. Suddenly, you could, well, with B and the 2.3, you could take a sample, convert it to a wavetable, and then upload it into the instrument, and then carry it away from the instrument. And that was really neat. That meant that when you were sat with the instrument and the terminal, you could do something more than you could do with the instrument. But you could then take the instrument away, perform, and come back. And so, yeah, absolutely. I unashamedly admit that I stole that concept for what we do with everything we do, because I think it's we've had, there are obviously a lot of haters out there, and hello to all of them. But people say, oh, it's the VST and box, and well, it's not actually. There's an awful lot of hardware and software technology, and they're very separate. But we try within what we do with the Modal app in particular to not replicate things. And one of the things that we're really conscious of is making sure that you don't need the app in order to use the instrument.
Yes.
The app should enhance the instrument.
Yes.
And so, particularly with something like Cobalt, which uses its quite complex algorithms in a very unusual way for a polyphonic synth, the app actually helps you understand visually what's going on quite quickly. And I was talking with a very well-known sound designer who was being very kind about the Cobalt and the Argon, because he found that he very quickly picked up both instruments because of the app, because it's kinesthetic. You've got the interface here and the interface here, and your brain is using all of its abilities to process to do that. So yeah, it was very much a conscious, and it's a core of what we do. The app, and also the fact that the app integrates all of the instruments together. You have one app. You don't have multiple instantiations. You have one app, and everything lives inside that ecosystem. And you'll see that go even further over the next few years.
Oh, so if you have more than one, I've only ever had one Modal thing attached at a time. So if you have two, it gets folded into that same app. That's
absolutely. In fact, one of the problems of making synths is that you end up not having much time to play music, because we need to test this feature. Is this fixed? And so you end up not making some music, but testing whether X, Y, Z works properly. But yeah, just for a giggle, I think I got 32 tabs open, or something, 31 tabs open inside Modal app by just turning on every piece of kit that I could. But yeah, everything exists inside one app, and you'll see that go a little further with some of the new products in the future. But yeah, it's very conscious.
I mean, I found that what it does, because there's one of those things that you lose when you move to hardware, is you lose all that visual feedback that a soft synth gives you. I mean, not every soft synth is useful in this way, which is a bit of a crime. But what I like to see in a soft synth is I like to see everything moving that's been modulated. If I'm modulating something, I expect to see it move. And of course, in hardware, that doesn't really happen. I'm modulating the cutoff, but the cutoff isn't doing anything. That knob is sitting there staring at me at the wrong value. And so the integration with the app suddenly throws back up all of that visual clues so that you can see what's being modulated. And that really does open up a synth. Well, no, I mean, as you say, you don't need it. It just makes the journey that bit easier, because you can see and identify, and then you know which knob is doing what, rather than having to explore or drill down to work out where is the modulation matrix and what is this routed to. it's easier if you've got those clues.
So you click things on the app and it will respond on the screen. And so actually you then, oh, hang on, that's how I get to the mod slots. Now I understand it. And it's a kinesthetic approach to learning, which is that you're using multiple of your sensory skills.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm really nice to hear you like that. It's something that we focus on. The modal app is something we're very precious about. We want to do a lot more with it. We've been really careful to try and not make it overly complex and make it very quick and easy to use. And I love using it on an iPad. It's my favourite. Just stick it on the iPad, especially on Argon X. Just stick the iPad there and bang, you've got this really nice sort of bigger interface. But and especially as engines get more complex, the more interaction, the more interface you can get to what's going on in the engine. You can have different things going on. So yeah, it's something we try hard to get right.
Yeah. Well, good job. Could I ask a little bit about the change that happened between the Craft synths? Because I remember, I think it was through Gear for Music or something. It's almost like an exclusive. Didn't you do the Craft synth and Craft drum? These two things that were the flat packed.
Yeah.
What's it?
I've got them there to reach. I'll get them. But Craft synth. The history of Craft synth is really simple and great fun. We met a really wonderfully talented guy, a guy called Matt Jackson, who had designed this little voice engine. And we wanted to develop a voice engine which was a step away from the 002. I saw some questions about the 008. Maybe I'll come on to that later on if there's a time.
Sure, yeah.
But with the 002, we wanted to produce an engine that was a step away. 002 is great, but 56 waveforms, we wanted more. The ability to do audio modulation on the filter, we wanted more things. And the problem is that in a piece of software, if you want to route the output from a modulation source to a destination, it's a process link in software. If you want to do it in hardware, it's a physical link. And if you've then got a polyphonic synth, it's multiple physical links. So having the ability to then cross-mod these between different places, this is big hardware expense and cost and complexity. So with Craft Synth, Matt came along and he had his original idea and we helped him productionize it and it became Craft Synth 1. And it was people said, why on earth do you go from making $5,000 synthesizers to $199 synthesizers or $99 synthesizers? And it's because it's about the instrument. That's what matters. And I got emails from, there's a couple I probably can say. Calvin Harris, I think, bought 12 for his family for Christmas that year, which I was really touched. I loved it. Yeah. Because he was saying, this is what I do. Understand what I do. Play with this stuff.
Yeah.
And that was important. So Craft Synth was a really good way of us exploring new things. And Craft Synth led into Craft Rhythm. And Craft Rhythm is one of my favorite products we've ever made. It's not a lot of people understand what it can do. It has a really clever modulation system built in, and you can modulate the effects. So you can then do all sorts of on a little tiny £100 synth. It wasn't exclusive to Gearfort worldwide. We as a company, I come back to that comment I made about Axel. When you start a business and you don't know everyone, it's very hard to know who you should work with and who you shouldn't work with. Yeah. And so, the Gearfort guys are really smart people. I used to go to Red Submarine in New York.
Yes, of course.
The original, if you remember, that's where they came from.
Of course, yes.
They're a really great bunch of very passionate people. And they saw the craft. They went, wow, this is epic. We'll buy every one you can make. What are you going to say? No?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they were incredibly kind, and they really did some great marketing videos. And again, people, when we were making the 002 and 008, if you're not looking for a $5,000 synth, you might not have come across Modal. With the Craft synth and the Craft Rhythm, suddenly we went into a new market segment. And we had some very strange comments, of course, with the Sculpt. We initially put it onto Kickstarter. And people said, you're selling out. Oh, you're selling out. And one of the things I really struggle to try and explain to people is that Sony have used Kickstarter. Yeah, absolutely. Hello, Craft.
There we go. I found it.
I was trying to find the picture the other day. A really nice guy in Australia sent me a picture of his two kids who must have been under 10, both making their craft synths on Christmas morning.
Ah, brilliant.
That to me, that's what I wanted to try and do. I want to try and get stuff to make people make music. And he said, thank you, because I've been trying to get my kids into music and into technology, and here is something that does that. And it
Mm.
was great. It was really, really wonderful to be involved in that. And lots of lovely um, user stories. There's one gentleman who actually composed a beautiful classic opera, or a classic piece of music, and used his CraftSynth 1 within the composition. It's beautiful, absolutely stunning. And it gave him a passion. It brought in, it sparked something for him. That's what we're about. That's what an instrument should do.
Yeah.
So the craft rhythm was amazing. The sculpt was a really amazing time for us as people. A huge amount of software engineering went into that to make it. 4-voice poly in this little package was quite complex to engineer. And people say, "Oh, why did you put it on Kickstarter?" Well, very simple, because people on Kickstarter found out about Modal because of Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And so people in Taiwan, people in Japan, people in Korea who'd never heard of Modal or seen what we were about bought our instrument and said, "Wow, this is great." And one of the things I'm proudest of, really genuinely, honestly, I'm proudest of, is when I get an email from a customer saying, "I bought a CraftSynth 2 and I loved it so much, I bought a Sculpt, and I loved it so much, I bought an Argon, and I loved it so much, I bought a Cobalt." And that's something that really, it feels we've done something right.
Yes.
So that's a bit of the evolution of where we went digital.
Yeah. I mean, you can see why people go 002 CraftSynth. There is an element of what on earth happened there. But I mean, you're right, at the time as well, and the pricing on it was such an accessible way to get a little synthesizer. Brilliantly
It
so.
gave us the opportunity to develop a brand new voice engine, and it was a completely new voice engine. A lot of the drift and the spread functions, which are inside the Argon and Cobalt, that technology actually is derived from what we developed inside Sculpt.
Mm.
And Sculpt to CraftSynth was another step where we thought, hang on, we could take the CPU power that does 4 voices and actually reduce it to 1 and give it more synthesis power. And that was why CraftSynth came about. But it's very tough knowing what product to make. There are products.
Yeah.
Interesting. I saw a comment about any Eurorack. No, absolutely not. And I'll tell you why. For me, and it's not because I'm not into modular. I love modular. I've had a System 700, which is my favorite synth of all time. Huge amount of System 100M. I only sold my Oakley modular 5U system a few years ago, which I really loved. So it's not that I don't love modular at all. It's that when we first started looking at Eurorack, there were maybe 100 manufacturers. When we had finished the design of the prototypes, there were about 400.
Mm.
And I dread to think how many are today. And the Eurorack market tends to be based around people buying, the same people buying one module, so that you have a fairly finite number of people actually investing in Eurorack.
Yes.
And as a manufacturer, we made the conscious decision to stop being a small volume manufacturer and make things in larger volume to get the price point right. And it's not compatible with Eurorack. It's that market size just isn't there.
Is that a direct result of the CraftSynth experience then, that the way that you're able to push out to a far greater customer base, and that's had a direct effect on how you then chose to manufacture after that point?
And also it means what we can do. So the Argon and the Cobalt, they have a solid aluminium chassis and a Fatal mechanism. They've got lots of really nice stuff inside there.
Yeah.
And if we were to make that here in the UK, we couldn't do it for that price. It's physically impossible. Just the aluminium costs alone. I mean, I'm not going to go into political things, but trying to manufacture anything in the UK is just absolutely impossible.
No, we're a manufacturing powerhouse, they tell us. We're doing everything now. We're making our own jeans, the whole lot.
I'm not going to get political. I really am not. Sorry. It's
That's
not happening tonight. No, but seriously, it's when you make something, if you make jam or if you make biscuits, you want as many people as possible to enjoy them. That's
of course,
the point in doing.
Yeah.
And so, in order to make things at a price point that the market will accept, you have to do that. And unfortunately, that means you have to have volume. You can't make 400 or something in China. It's just not possible. I mean, just for example, on Sculpt synth, I mean, the investment in the plastics tooling was around $25,000, to $30,000.
Mm.
You can't do that unless you're going to know that it's going to have a longevity. So it's not that I'm anti-Eurorack in the slightest. Adore Eurorack. It's fantastic, and I have a system which I love very much. We have made some prototypes, and we showed them in 2016, I think, from memory. And the market reaction was, "Wow, fantastic! We'll order 3." Okay. And
Yeah.
so it's not where our mind is at right now.
Yeah. No, I can see that. I can see that. Um, oh, there was a question that's just like leaked out the side of my head. Oh, I hate when that happens.
Yeah.
Um,
It'll come over
yeah.
on the chat. But so in terms of the question you asked was did CraftSynth? Yes, it took us into new markets. It took us into and so did Sculpt, and it gave us more people who are aware of what we do. And so it was logical that rather than the next product being a $5,000 synth again, we'd have something that was maybe closer to that market space and offer a next step up with Argon and then with Cobalt.
Yeah, I mean, was it a massive risk? I mean, when you stuck 25 grand into the manufacturing of the Sculpt, was it a done deal? Did you feel this is going to be no problem, or was it really stepping out into the dark?
Terrifying. Every time you make a product, it's terrifying. Yes. It is terrifying, but in the same way that when you're a musician, you put out your art and you ask people to interpret it, and you are opening yourself up to objective analysis.
Of course.
So it's terrifying. Have I got it right? We actually, as a team, the team has worked together. We've all worked together for now kind of 7-8 years in some cases, and so as a result, we don't organise into market research panels about what we should make next. We have so many ideas about what we want to make, and everyone in the team is a musician. Everyone plays actively, whether it's live or obviously not recently, but because of that, everyone says, I really wish I had the ability. I mean, one example, the programmable arpeggiator, which is one of my favourite features because I grew up with the SH-101.
Right.
We were having a design meeting. I said, right, we've got to have the ARP, press and hold a button, and you can play the notes in, and it does it. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, right, let's do that. And that's how we create instruments rather than the market. I don't know if you're a Reginald Perrin fan. It's probably a bit old for too many people on here. But,
I know what you mean.
And grew up wanting it. That's not how we do it. That's not where our motivation comes from. And and the other thing is we don't want to imitate. That's a really, really key thing to us. We don't want to make a copy of something.
I mean, that must be difficult with the length of development time. I mean, because you're the Argonate and of course the Hydrosynth occupy a very similar, not identical, but similar space. But you both must have been working on those, before either of them became known.
Well, 100%. It is with respect to twice the price.
Yes.
And in fact, the Deluxe is 4 times the price. And also it comes from a company called Modeli, who are one of the world's largest manufacturers of musical instruments.
Oh, all right,
who employ about 5,000 people. So it is different, I think. Don't get me wrong, Glenn Darcy is a really smart guy, and I think the instrument's amazing. But isn't that exciting that everyone's doing something different and actually creating something new? We have had conversations with people. Why don't we make a such and such remake? And why? Why don't we do something new that no one else has done before? And with the Argon, it's unlike any other wave. There are instruments out there that claim to be wavetable instruments. They're not. They're actually sample replay instruments. You can't modulate the wavetables, for example, and you can on Argon. So we do something unique. We hope. We think it's unique. And so, we're motivated by trying to do something unique and musical. It's got to be musical. It's got to be an instrument first and foremost.
Yes. Do you think, is it, the Cobalt and the Argon share a shell, I suppose, or a print or a stamp or something. Could they have been alternative firmwares? Was there ever a thought of expanding the Argon into being a Cobalt rather than an individual instrument?
The Mini is a different machine to the Mini Countryman. They're the same brand and they're the same technology inside. They're different products positioned for a different user.
Okay.
I think that's where it comes back to a couple of misconceptions in the industry, which is that just having different firmware means that you're stepping away from being an instrument you power on and you play. That's a crucial thing in
Mm.
any instrument. If you've got to say, oh, hang on, oh, I really want to, oh, hang on, I've got to load that other firmware. It's a bit like going back to the vSynth, where you had, oh, I really want to create this 303 thing, but I've got the other thing. They're different
Mhm.
products, in the same way that my Apple Watch is different to the Android Google Watches. They are different things that do things differently. Yeah, we're not into producing apps. That's not what we do for music creation. There are, I mean, you're of a similar vintage to me. You'll probably remember Creamware Noah and all those things that try to be multiple different things in what it doesn't work.
No.
You pick up a Strat because you want to play a Strat sound. You pick up a Telly because you want a more twangy sound. They're instruments, and Cobalt has a very defined flavor of sound, and Argon has a very. I mean, at the end of the day, there's subtractive synthesizers.
Mm.
All subtractive synthesizers, from building your VCO modules, produce a huge amount of harmonics, and the type of harmonics that they produce and the type of filter you marry those to give you a different sound. And so they are genuinely really different things. So no, that was never a thought in our mind. I mean, I would love to have had a different front panel. I mean, certainly Sam, who's our design engineer, would have loved to have a different front panel.
Mm.
But the $20,000 tooling cost to change the stamping process on the aluminium extrusion, it's and also we created that in the middle of lockdown. We're not able to travel to the factory to do that. We had hell just trying to get the color right. Because you're trying to communicate with someone 9,000 miles away about how to do something. So we actually took a least risk path. And I think actually the other thing that, again, customers like is that they get used to the workflow of one and they're straight into the workflow of the other.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a measure of familiarity about it. There is also a measure of confusion. I mean, I've had comments on my videos on the Cobalt, I think, all about the Argon 8. And so I just say, no, it's actually a different synthesizer. So, I mean, there is, regardless of your intention behind their individuality, there's always going to be a certain amount of cluelessness out there because we have to deal with that every day.
Well, it's a bit more than that, which is actually down to marketing. And the problem we have is that we're a small company.
Yeah.
And we have other companies who produce products that claim to have, say, 32 voice polyphony. Well, that's okay if you've got one waveform playing, but as soon as you actually stack them, you go down to 8 voice poly. But they don't tell you that on the actual marketing material.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we should be a little more overt. Maybe we should say, actually, here is. But the problem is, it costs huge amounts. Marketing is our biggest cost. It's really tough to try and do everything.
Yes.
James High in America, who works with us, who's just such a cool guy, and James, if you're watching, hey dude, he produces some really exceptional videos that show the difference. But actually producing big advertising campaigns and banner campaigns, we haven't got the resource to do that. I think we have done some of it, but not as much as we'd like. And that's just down to our size. So it's not that we intend to confuse. We would never confuse.
No, of course not. I mean, how are you straddling the old school marketing with new form marketing? Do you find yourself are you print advertising? Are you advertising sound on sound, things like that, or have you gone fully social?
I don't know, because I tend to try and not get involved in it. No, I mean, I work with a really brilliant guy called Christian Stahl. Christian was at Behringer, he was at UA, he was at InMusic, and he had really serious careers there. And so me saying, I think we should do X, Y, that's not how modal works. It's very flat. We try, we haven't done them recently, but we used to have a thing called the Friday Pub. And the Friday Pub, because we couldn't actually physically get together. As a team, when everyone was in Bristol, we would have lunch together every Thursday. We used to call it Chow Down. It was just sacrosanct. You couldn't go travelling if NAMM's on a Thursday, tough. we're having chat. And that culture is really core to Modal because we talk about everything that matters to us.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter if somebody who has one idea, we can discuss it, we can consider it, and it may just be that idea. A good example was that John, our VP of Sales, John said we should make a 61 kit. We went, really? Really? Do you know what? In America, customers love the Argon X and the Cobalt X. We'd never considered that. And as a team, we're better and stronger because everyone has a voice. So, from that perspective, I forgot where I was going with that. My apologies. As a company, we don't sit and say, yes, you should do 400 pages of advertising in SOS. And I know, hi, Paul, if you're watching. I'm sorry we haven't. The world, I mean, I don't know how. Again, I mentioned it earlier on the call. I would get the number 47 bus, sit on the top deck, and jump off and run into WH Smith and go and get that copy of ENMM that month. I always make sure I was the first to be there. And it was his M&MT was my favourite because he had the cassette on the front. I love that magazine. And then, of course, it grew to Sound of Sound and Audio Media. And I think that what we have done is spend an enormous amount of money on video marketing and the tools for that. And so actually, I was going to do this call from our video studio we have, which is set up with every one of the products, and you can everything just works. I do a call like this once every week, 2 weeks, to talk to our distributors to explain about our products. So I think that the actual end marketing, Christian's an absolute genius in marketing. I don't interfere in what he does.
Right. I mean, the photography is excellent on the website, I have to say, or should point out.
There's a lovely comment. Thank you. I really appreciate that about the patches. That's something that really matters to me. When you sell someone an instrument and then keep bleeding them for more money for more sounds, I think that's just not what we're about. And we actually realised we had about 1,000 patches, which I was really, really pleased about. And so, we said, hang on, let's put this on the homepage and say, look, these are all the patches. They're free. There's no charge.
Yeah,
so no. You just scroll back up.
Yeah, yes, indeed. I mean, funny enough, before we came on air, I was putting this together. I was trying to find the pricing because I absolutely assumed these were 30 quid each. Because that's the general done thing, and I kept finding download. It just downloads it. Oh, they must all be for nothing, which is brilliant.
It's done through the Modal app, so you haven't got to mess around with SysX. You just press a button, download the file, download it into Modal app, and bang, it does it on Mac.
I mean, it would be a bit of a drag if you had to stick it into one of those cassette players and connect the ear to the to the thing, and then you go.
That. I mean, I was trying to update some patches on another very modern synthesizer with SysX, and I had to go through 3 different MIDI interfaces before it worked.
Yes. Well,
it's 2022 people, and that's we've had one click updating has actually been ever since 002. 002 on the front panel, you click and go cloud, check for update available, do it, go and have a cup of tea, come back, and it's done.
Yeah.
That was a really important point to Modal from the start, which is I don't want to spend time messing around trying to find out that my XYZ MIDI interface doesn't work properly over USB at the right speed, so therefore the SysX craps out. Oh, I've got to go and re-download it. Oh. This is 2022.
I mean, are there even MIDI interfaces? This still boggles my mind. I mean, in my drawer, I've got a MIDI Sport from 1990 something or other, and an eMagic.
One.
And I've got an MT4. I mean, an eMagic one, which I don't imagine there's any drivers for now. But what do we plug things into these days? Because we have all this gear. I tend to be using CV more than MIDI these days, or USB, I guess. Those are our choices, but there's definitely a lack of MIDI interfaces.
It works so well, though. In terms of MIDI interfaces, there are a couple of companies who are producing some really cute Ethernet MIDI interfaces, and they're very nice. And the tech is actually there. But I mean, the whole question about MIDI 2.0, it's a lot of discussion. We've had USB MIDI since 2014, but then again, if you look at Craft Synth 1, we thought USB MIDI only would be fine, and we got so many people saying, "Why didn't you put MIDI on it?" So we made sure with Sculpt it was full size MIDI, not 3.5 adapters. And although there is now a standard for 3.5 MIDI, thankfully. But
Is
in
there?
terms of
Is there? I didn't
yeah,
get the memo on
absolutely.
that. Is there now a standard?
Yeah, CDM, Credit Digital Music. I can't remember his standard has been adopted now, and everyone agrees to use it.
Oh,
Because
thank
beforehand you
goodness.
had different standards, and therefore, if you lost your dongle, you were screwed.
Yes.
So yeah, there is now thankfully a standard. But
Well, it wasn't just that. It
but
was I would spend hours putting a different one on the end, plugging it in. No, it doesn't work. Another one. I didn't seem to work out anyway. How do I test to see what type it is? And you're just going through them, and you find out I've got all of mine are type A, and I need a type B.
Christmas
Yeah.
party game. Will this work?
Will this work?
James asked a question. If you do you mind me asking
Not
James
at
or
all.
answering James' question? The yeah, thank you for saying we spend enormous amounts of time agonising over whether the sound engine sounds right. And people say, "Why haven't you put a 4-pole ladder filter on the Argon?" And the reason is because the specific wavetable sound we wanted didn't fit that. It fitted a 2-pole better. And architecturally, that's why it was designed to do that. And you can't put everything. We can't put toasters in products we try. So yeah, it's finding that sound. But that comes back to something I said earlier. Everyone's a musician in the company. We're all techs, and everyone in the development team, is a first graduate from a music technology degree course. Apart from me, because I'm the least clever person in the company. But everyone is focused on making sure it sounds right because it's an instrument. If it's not an instrument, then it's just another tech.
Yeah. No, too right. So let me ask you about.
No, John. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, what I say? Let me ask you about MPE then, because you have MPE support built into the Sculpt as well as the other bits and pieces. Do you not? What did I
002
say?
has MPE. 002 is the first hardware instrument to have MPE by a long way.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So what was it about that took you along?
So again, it comes back to we're musicians. We play. And MP is really cool. I have my own favourite. I really like the Keith McMillan Cable Pro 4. I think it's fun to play.
Oh yeah.
Other people who I work with love the instruments because they're more guitarists than key players, and it really releases your creativity in a different way. And it's if we can add it, we will do. It's something that we try and make sure our instruments are as competent as possible and are as well supported as possible. And there are other new standards upcoming, which again we want to make sure we can support and give to customers. But MP is something that a lot of people love, and it was logical for us to put it onto Sculpt. I think it is still the cheapest MP instrument you can buy.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So also your Sculpt has a capacitive keyboard. It was never really intended for major composition on that capacitive keyboard. It was always intended that you would plug it into something else, whether it be an MPK25 or whether it be a Rode block or whatever. And that's how people use it. So yeah, MP is a great example of technology giving us something new, a new way of performing, a new way of expressing. Ian, no, there will never be a modal theremin. No, we don't imitate. I think there's out there, and some of the best ones are homemade. But no, in terms of MP, yeah, it's one example of a great technology. We would have been crazy not to support it, and we made sure we were the first. And so MP is on 002 from day one and on double.
Do you think MIDI 2.0 is still going to keep on creeping forward towards realization?
Absolutely. I mean, we're obviously members of the MIDI consortium, and we're on the discussions. Obviously, it's a non-disclosure based environment.
Sure.
So, but yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of people working really hard on that, and thank you to everyone in that consortium who's doing that. It's incredible. I mean, can you imagine trying to get 50 manufacturers to all agree on a standard and implement it at the same time?
Yeah.
So the work they're putting in, thank you for it. I really appreciate it. And yeah, absolutely, we'll be there at the pack. It's something that it's new technology. So absolutely, yes. And the things like USB audio. Sorry.
I say, I mean, it's good to hear because since Rowley went down, it kind of felt like the wind got knocked out of it, and it just disappeared into not hearing anything more about it.
I think maybe that's
it's
a UK
good to hear. Maybe.
Yeah, that's maybe a centric perspective. Forgive me, but there are a lot of people around the world working very hard to get MIDI 2 out. I think again, lockdown and pandemic has kiboshed a lot of stuff going on. For me, NAMM is more about meeting the MIDI team and actually meeting up with your peers and just having technical discussions. And not having been able to do that for how many years have we not been able to travel? It's 2 years. It's So the guys work really hard. There's a lot of behind the scenes MIDI consortium meetings at NAMM, which are closed door.
Yes.
And so, that not having those things, not having those opportunities. Zoom is okay, but it's not the same.
But that's the weird thing. I mean, for us sitting on the fringes or trying to find out about it, we occasionally glimpse a guy in glasses pointing at a graph, with an OHP saying, this is MIDI 2.0 and it's something about this. And it's like, what? And whereas what we want to see something nicely shot and somebody actually talking about having a keyboard connected to something else, which achieves something, because we're simple. We're simple people.
We want people. It's understandable. But the problem is, again, a little understood. MIDI consortium doesn't make a huge amount of money. It's not like it's a $1 billion company. It's actually a bunch of manufacturers who contribute a small number of thousands of dollars a year. And they're actually very involved in promoting MIDI technology into schools and academia. Right. So they're very active people who are doing that as well. It does a lot more than just the standard consortium. But yeah, in terms of trying to get demonstrators, as I say, imagine trying to herd 40 sheep in different countries all around the world in different languages and different time zones and get them to it takes time. I still remember getting my first MIDI instrument, which I think was probably called Poly 800, and being, whoa, this is so cool. So that was 1984. So,
sounds about right. Yeah.
Only 40 years, coming up. I think actually to how good the technology is that 40 or nearly years on, well, it still works really well. And USB MIDI runs at far higher baud rates, and so you can do a lot more. So the actual protocol, there's life in that old dog yet.
Well, there is. MPE again is a great example of that in how to sort of hack an existing system to work in a far greater way than we ever imagined.
Yeah, and I think there are other things. I mean, if you look at the guys at CME, they're doing their WIDI stuff, which is really interesting. Yeah. It's really exciting. This is all based around something that the guys at Sequential, Yamaha, Roland came up with in 1984. I'm honoured to be sat with an industry that is doing that. So yeah.
Nice. So tell us why, with the Argon X and the Cobalt X, that the stuff isn't in the middle? What do you do if you're a lefty?
I do apologise to our Southpaws brethren and sister. The answer is twofold. One, we did some designs of putting it in the middle and it looked pants. It just looked rubbish. And the other thing comes back to you can stick your iPad. If you scroll down just a smidge, you can stick an iPad or a small laptop on that right-hand space.
Yes, you can. Yeah. That's genius, actually.
It was, I wouldn't say it was genius, but bless you for that, thank you. But it was more just that, hang on, that's quite a useful place. From that perspective, yes, we are still using TCP. From 1950, God bless Bolt, Berenick and Newman, and the guys at ARPANET. But no, in terms of that space, there's a reason why. But for Southpaws, I do apologise. Yes.
Well, I mean, you're in good company with Nord. I think they have a similar everything stuck over onto one side, but it's not anywhere near as pronounced on these because you have a much wider control surface anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. UI design is an art. We have one member of the team who's absolutely genius at it. And poor old Sam will in fact, this morning a new design was put up for a new thing we might be working on. And the barrage of complaint from everyone. But I don't like that bit there. Oh no, move this there. And I feel for Sam, bless him, having to put up with it. But it is an art, and it's something we do agonise over.
Yes.
There was a lot of negative reaction to the diagonal writing on the
On the
the
sculpt.
sculpture. And I'm really sad about that. In fact, actually, I had a CL Expander in 1982, which had exactly the same thing. And I loved it. It was great fun. And it was just a way of getting more space to get longer descriptions. That's why we did it. You try hard, you don't always get it right for everyone.
No, that's true.
UI design, UI design. I suppose what we really should do is have a sliding panel that moves left or right.
No, that's Eurorack with sliding nuts. That's what that is. Or Eurorack in general, because you can rearrange your panel however you want it, to some degree.
I think, the world is. My youngest son is left-handed, and it's tough. It's the world is sort of against him. And I remember someone showing me left-handed forks and spoons, which I thought were an interesting concept. It's very hard in the world when you make things to try and make them suit everyone.
Absolutely.
But the genuine reason for the VX was, hang on, we can actually give this space for a laptop, and that's how, or for a tablet, and that was actually what we wanted to do. So that's why we put it into the marketing we did.
Ever considered putting a music stand on the back? Is that something that's ever become part of?
Because what happens is when you put a music stand on the back, you actually there's a couple of things. James and his toaster. Every feature we add just adds more cost and weight. And not trying to cry my own beer, but we as a company paid $2.50 for air freight shipping. Pre-pandemic, it's now more like $14 to $16 a kilo.
Wow.
And when you make a product that weighs 10 kilos, that means that your cost of shipping has gone up by $100. $100? So everything that adds weight. Also, because that keyboard stand probably would only work for a certain number of people. It may not work for other people. And the other problem that drives me nuts is when you have something. I still have a load of Apex Ultimate stands. I really love them. And if you've got stuff that sort of sits in the way, it then doesn't sit properly. And so, there's a lot of different reasons. No, that's not something we're going to do. Sorry, we're not going to do. I'm not going to.
Well, that's okay then, I guess. I mean, it is a heavy beast.
Royalties are just not going to come in now. Yes.
The Cobalt is a heavy machine. Is that built-in weight, or is it simply because that's how much it weighs, or did you consciously decide to make it heavy?
No, not in the slightest. Quite the reverse. And there is actually a science of adding weight to products. So my desk phone I have, which is a Cisco VoIP phone, has a lot of weight added to make it feel good.
Yeah, it works. And it does.
It is. Again, it's part of the brain interaction with UI and things. So, but no, with both Argon and Cobalt, I mean, we originally designed. In fact, it's out of shot, but there's another one up there, which is the very, very first handmade prototype I built of an Argon, and it uses a 3-part chassis. So it's got 2 aluminium extrusions and a steel plate, and it weighed just a ridiculous amount of weight. So we then had to go back to the drawing board, and we then use a unitary chassis. So the chassis on Argon and Cobalt, if you remember when you were a kid, or if you have kids, you put the plasticine into the little squidgy thing and you pull the lever down and out comes the shape. So extrusion is the science as it's known. The aluminium is extruded for both the top and the bottom, so it's solid aluminium. And these things have fallen downstairs, been tipped off stages, and carried on working. The joystick, unfortunately, does tend to get panned in first, but that's just because it sticks out. You can't make a joystick that doesn't stick out. But yeah, they're designed to have a life. I had a customer in France who sent one back and said it had a bit of an accident. Could you fix it? And it just had been banged in. It had been pulled off. Apparently, somebody had come in to the studio and they were, I think, fitting carpet from memory, and they just pulled the cables and pulled the synth off with it.
Jeez.
So yeah, it's an extruded aluminium top and bottom. It's not added weight. It's just metal weighs lots.
Yeah, I mean, it's a comforting weight. That's the thing. You take it out of the box, and there's something about that mass that you're dealing with, which is a good thing. It's a very positive thing. I mean, I reviewed the Cobalt 8 and the Korg Modwave, there we go. At a similar time, and they are chalk and cheese. You pick the two up together, and the cord goes to the ceiling, and the other one you're struggling with, and that does have an impact on how you feel about the thing, inevitably.
I would never. It's unprofessional to discuss your competitors because that's down to what our customers feel. But there is a reason we put a Phaeton TP9 in there, and
it feels great.
It adds a lot of cost. I mean, it probably is £100, maybe $100, maybe of the actual cost of the product. And we have to ship those from Tunisia to Amsterdam, which are logistics hubs, then send them to China. And now with shipping going through the roof. So, but it plays beautifully. It really does. And also beautifully over a long period of time. I mean, this 002 here, that is actually the very first one built. And that keyboard mechanism has been in it since it was built in 2014, and it still plays exquisitely. In fact, they tend to bed in, actually. They tend to settle in a bit, the Phaeton mechs. But if you actually look inside, a Phaeton mech weighs 8 kilos, 6 kilos. The 61 key is a heavy, it's got a lot of weight on each of the keys because of the semi-weighting. We don't sit and pour concrete in. We don't tip in extras.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you forgive me, I'll just bring in some criticism. It's all right. It's going to be okay. We'll get through this. I mean, one of the criticisms that has been pointed at the Cobalt and the Argon is to do with those knobs and the play there is.
I'm glad you brought this one up.
How do you feel about the criticism, and how do you respond to that?
Do you remember when we were discussing about marketing and how difficult it is? So I was actually in a meeting with somebody who I love. He's a lovely guy, and he's a German fellow. And he said to me, "Oh yeah, no, this product is far superior knobs, far superior." And I'm not going to reveal the make of the knob, but I went and bought one of the products that used it, and I took it apart. And if you don't believe me, look. Sorry, the camera's there, isn't it? Sorry. You can see I took one apart. And if you Google other manufacturers who have issues with failed encoders, they're actually utilizing this part. Sorry, forgetting the camera's there. And this is going to get really boring. So if anyone needs to make a cup of tea or a quick tea break, just now's the time. Have you played Scale Extrix?
Yeah.
And you're thinking, what the hell is he on about? So you remember that scratchy, scrapey feel? So
yes.
I know you know your electronics because you built your Decca and all the rest of it. But you have a rheostat, and a rheostat works on a conductive track, usually carbon, which has a wiper that scrapes across it. And as more of that carbon comes in, the resistance goes up. That's how a rheostat works. And a potentiometer is a circular, generally, rheostat. So what is interesting there is, and in fact, hopefully my camera won't get totally screwed, but I don't know whether you can see, this isn't a macro lens, but can you see the score on those? You see the marks?
Mm-hmm.
That's actually from a unit that was, that unit's less than a month old. So what happens is that physical restriction of movement, that is the wiper being held intimately onto the carbon, is what feels nice. But the problem is it's actually scraping the conductive element away. And if you've ever bought an old synth or an old mixing desk and spent 2 weeks trying to actually get the pots to live again, so this old great stuff, it doesn't last for very long. Now, we use a pot. We only use a pot from a company called Borns. Borns are a Borns have been around since the 1950s. As a quality, they are, in my opinion, the best out there. There are Alps and Borns are the two major manufacturers of digital encoders. Now, an encoder works in a different way. It has, on the wiper, a switch which is segmented in two ways, so it knows whether you're going one way or the other way. Problem is that the way that the switch works is it has to float. And that's just an intrinsic aspect of the digital encoder. Now, the reason we put digital encoders into our products is because if you have patch recall, there is nothing more infuriating than loading a patch and finding out your pot where you wanted it to be there is actually here. Now
Yes.
there are some UI things you can do. We call it walkthrough, where you actually you drive up to that point, and only when you get to that point does it start. That's horrible. The other one is where you actually do recall from that point. So even though the pot's here, you say that's zero, and oh, hang on, over 127 goes to so
Yes.
pots, rotary pots, do not fit a digital recall synth very well. So we use digital encoders. We use them from Bournes. They are superbly manufactured, and this little chappy has a service life of a quarter of the Bournes encoder. I would rather make a product and an instrument that I know is going to be carrying working. And 002s, I'm going to hate, I shouldn't say this, I'm going to touch wood. I don't know if any 002s ever had an encoder fail. And they're 7 or 8 years old now. And some of those are in some, I mean, Apple have 4 of them in their studio. J.J. Abrams uses these on every film. Calvin Harris I was using it. These things are used pretty hard. And there's a reason why we use digital encoders. Unfortunately, it means there is more movement. There's a couple of things we're doing for next generation product to improve that as best we can. But an encoder will always have more field because the switches float across the surface rather than being intimately in contact. And if I suggested to Christian that we should spend $20,000 on a marketing campaign to tell the world about why he quit, it's a tough one, trying to educate the market. We've done it since we started, but there is a reason. Does any of that make any sense?
No, it does make total sense. I mean, I think the problem that's always going to be is that because it's an instrument, because of our engagement with it, there's a certain amount of feel, which because we may be used to analog knobs, that feels there's a reaction to that initial feel. I think the information you put out there, I mean, John has been very big on this on Facebook as well, correcting everybody when any mentions of it. I think that's helpful. I mean, I know when I did my review, in some ways I actually forgot to mention it because I'd already researched it and had understood the reason for it, and so then it sort of became a non-issue. So I then, although I'd meant to write about it, I just completely forgot. And by the time it was printed, it wasn't in there, which of course I then got criticised for because people go, "Well, the knobs are wobbly. You didn't even bloody mention it." It's like,
I remember there was a support email that came in, and I do read every support email that comes in, and someone said, "Oh, I'm very concerned this is going to fall apart." Actually, there's a reason that the movement is actually a reason why it will last longer, and it's a trade-off in everything. Just to ask, I'd love to put LEDs around all of our encoders, but each LED you adds $2 to the cost of a product. So because of this physical space, the drilling, the actual amount of the LED, etc., maybe not $2, maybe 80 cents. So that's what it adds to the cost of a product. So if you stick them around every encoder, it costs a lot. And we try and get the features and the price balance right. It's really tough. We'd love to add. I mean, there are so many UI things we've done, but the cost is just terrific. I really wanted to put capacitive sensing on some of the knobs, particularly on the 002 originally, because as you touch it, it would then jump and display. But the cost of doing it, the complexity of doing it, and because you put lots of capacitive knobs on and suddenly you've got an EMC problem. So when you go into the EMC testing chamber, you fail because you're in a there's a trade-off in everything when you try and make a product in volume. But we are working with Bournes to change the encoder. There's a whole new generation of stuff coming through. It's going to take a little while before it actually impacts, and it's not going to be immediately. But there is a good reason why. But this little sucker, just saw somebody else saying that their other products have had the same issue. This little sucker has got a service life of about a quarter, or less than a quarter of the part we put in, and has been seen put in there. Just one other comment. There are other, as with all things in life, there are different qualities of encoder. And we use a Bournes encoder, not a low-level one, and that's why it lasts. Other companies use, or have used and then changed, using, should we say, less high-quality encoders. Encoders are actually more expensive than pots. That's another thing that's not necessarily understood. So an encoder actually costs about 60% more than the potentiometer. So.
Well, I think we nailed that one down then.
That's probably the most boring segment of a Malta music podcast ever. I
No,
really do
no,
apologise. You must
not
still actually want.
not at all. I spent 2 hours on a breadboard last week trying to get trying to get a waveform. So no, my viewership, my beloved audience are used to lots of long pauses.
I did. I wholeheartedly apologise for having spent far too long talking about encoders. But yeah, there is, as with all things, a genuinely good reason. It's not because we thought, yeah, we'll put some wobbly knobs on there. That's not what it is at all.
No, of course. Good. Well, that's. I think that's enormously helpful for all of us who think hard about these things. There was one question from earlier. Do you have representation in shops? Are there still music shops out there? Are you in Andertons, and is there? I don't even know what the landscape is anymore, not being in London. I don't know what Denmark Street looks. Is Denmark Street still there? Do you have?
No. Last people who had a shop, there were Red Dog. Red Dog had a shop. They had a pop up there for a while. I think
they did.
Maybe wrong. I miss Denmark Street. I remember vividly walking down Denmark Street and popping into Turnkey. It's a great place. And I always loved that if you bought a sampler, you got access to all the synths. It was a lovely shop. And as we mentioned, Rupert Afaf, he was someone who really brought a lot of life to that shop, and everyone else is involved. Of course, we're in music shops. We when we started this company, we said, we'll just work with a select band of very, very niche dealers. And that meant we didn't sell an awful lot of 002s and 008s because the way retailers tend to work is they'll have a band of very loyal customers. And once that band is bought, then they move on. And the retailing landscape is changing every second.
Yes.
I'm probably not the best person, John, and also Paul, who's joined us, Paul Wright, and Christian. These guys who've had 20, 30, 40-year careers in this industry have seen all the change. For me, I met John because I used to go and have a Saturday job as a teenager in Future Music, the shop he ran. And I remember vividly when we unboxed a Jupiter 6. And it was like a spiritual moment. I remember the first time we plugged a PG800 into a X3P, and it was these days. It's very much more here's the key thing. I used to go and buy ENMM or SOS, and would run down to the music store. And in those days, you went to the store to learn what was hot and what was cool about it.
Yeah.
These days, the consumer generally knows more about the product than the people in the shops. And that's not a criticism of the shops. It's just that the amount of product that's out there now is insane, and the features of it. So consumers are very well educated. They know what they're wanting. They know what they're buying. And that's a good thing. So obviously, with the rise of the online retailer, we've seen that change the landscape a lot. Also, the rise of Amazon. Amazon is expanding its activities and other places. But yeah, Andertons is one of my favourite stores in the world. As is Thomann. It's really important to remember the Thomann family started that because Hans Thomann's father used to put saxophones on the back of his motorbike, and his wife sat in the sidecar. There's a lovely picture of it when you go there. And it's just a beautiful shop to go to.
It is. It's a great shop, yeah.
Yeah, and it's the only place you'll see a euphonium, and then the next door you'll see some high-tech piece of whatever. It's incredible, and there are some beautiful shops. Bax is also another really lovely store. Music store in Cologne. In the UK, I think we've had retail hit much harder, maybe.
Yeah.
For lots of reasons. But I remember in the hometown I grew up in Southampton, we had 7 music shops. I think there might be one left, but it's really guitar shop mainly.
Yes.
But yes, you can go and play all the modern products at Andertons in the UK. You can go and play it at Digital Audio Networks in Berlin. You can go and play it at Sweetwater in Fort Wayne. You can go and play it in Sam Ash in, quite a few of them. You can go and play it in Guitar Centres. It's going to Guitar Centre, I think, more and more stores now. So it is, and the market is very different. But I think that's just the same thing with all technology, with all products. I didn't go to the Apple store to buy my iPhone. I just clicked and had it delivered. You know, in fact, I didn't go Christmas shopping. I was doing it online. So I think there are music stores out there, and support your music store because they have a
Yeah.
role in
I mean,
what we do.
I think that's why things like Synthfest have become so important. I mean, obviously
Yeah,
we've not had them recently, but those opportunities to bring manufacturers together in one place, where you know stuff is going to be, because going to your local shop, you're not always sure what is going to be out on demo, or whether the one keyboard you want to play is already occupied by some bloke who's going to be there all day.
or
So
whether it's a $2,000 synthesizer with £4 headphones.
yes,
Um,
with both sides working at once. I mean, that's quite a thing. So
yeah, I think going into a bricks and mortar store and touching and feeling is one of our biggest problems we have. And it's
yeah,
interesting you've mentioned other products. And when people do pick up our product or play our product and next door to other products, they go, "Oh, hang on, I get it now." And
yes,
that's actually our biggest challenge, is to get more people to experience our product. It takes time. It takes time to get people to understand what you're about. But I come back to another point that I made earlier, which is the thing that makes me so genuinely happy is when you see a customer saying, "I bought a Sculpt, and then I bought an ARG, and I bought a Cobalt." No, you think, well, okay, something we're doing is right for that customer. We just would love more people to play our products and get to know them. But there are stores out there. There are stores out there, yeah. You've got people like Music Matter. You've got people like Gear4. They actually have a really nice little walk-in store. It's very relaxed in their Gear4 store. Well worth going to if anyone's up in the sort of York area. You've got PMT stores that are still out there. You've got quite a few stores there. I think the shopping experience is different, but it is for everything these days.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's still a PMT in Norwich. I mean, it's been everything. It's been an Academy of Sound. It's been what happened after that? I can't remember. It was a digital village, a music
sound
village,
control,
sound control. Yes.
Yeah, there's been a lot of changes, but and there's some really good people in those stores.
Yeah, and it's funny because the store itself it's a beautiful store. Actually, they moved to new premises. That's probably a decade ago, but it seems very recent. They moved out of Anglia Square, which is a terrible place, a terrible venue location, into this really nice place on a corner. But it is down to, it doesn't really matter what the name on the door is. The people inside have always been consistently good, and that's the thing.
It's the same in a lot of retail. It was my father-in-law's birthday, so I went into the wine shop to go and buy him a bottle of wine for his birthday. And the lady who runs our local fabulous wine shop, I mean, she really is so knowledgeable. She said the business has never been so bad.
Yeah.
And I think retail, high street retail, I mean, apart from the fact that whether your position on COVID is, I don't really want to go into stores at the moment because of that. It's an awful time in retail. The lockdown saw the MI industry go absolutely nuts. A lot of that was driven by I remember trying to buy a Logitech webcam for my son because his schooling went online. And I don't know, it was like a £45 C920. People were selling them on the black market for 300 quid. And so you saw sales of microphones and audio interfaces and CADs all go great, but also the same for synthesizers and guitars. Whereas those markets, say amplification and for live audio, sound reinforcement and drums, they suffered. But I think this whole last 2 years, I reckon we're in an episode of Dallas. It's a bit like JR. We're going to wake up and it's all actually just been a dream.
Yes, but all the productivity, man, all the things we've got done over the last couple of years, that's the crazy things. I mean, the films and box sets I got to watch while I was recovering from COVID, there's never going to be the time again.
Actually, that's right, I'm growing beards. I started growing my beard during lockdown because I just thought I cannot be bothered to shave. And my wife let me for a change. But in terms of lockdown, it was a very strange and very tough time for a lot of companies. And there's another very well-known synth company who I was talking to the founder owner of. And he was really struggling to cope with his staff not actually being in the building and being able to walk around and see them. And I think we're very lucky at Modal. We actually developed a lot of technology and a lot of processes to work remotely well before the pandemic. And so we were quite well. But yeah, the cost of couriers to send stuff around has just gone absolutely nuts. But yeah, I think the world has changed, and that's affected retail. But the chip issues, oh boy, that's having an effect that you cannot believe on every walk of electronic life. It's truly nuts, and the scalping that's going on is just beyond belief. So that's actually more impactful than the pandemic in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, has that meant you've had to change any of your gear along the way?
Oh yeah, one chip we use in a product costs 64 cents normally, and we got notified that we couldn't. Our scheduled order. I've got some really amazing colleagues I work with who I'm very grateful, who are working incredibly hard to schedule parts. But with one chip, we got notification it was going to be a 73-week lead time.
That's a year and a half.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then we got an email. Oh, we've got 60,000 in stock. So this is a 60-cent chip. Yeah. Oh, we're in Hong Kong. We've got 60,000 of them in stock. $25.77 each.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just let that sink. And I have some people I know who are live in Singapore, and he used to get up at 5 a.m. to buy US dollars at the close of US dollar day, and then sleep for an hour or two, and then sell them in the UK pound market and make a few percentage points. And that foreign exchange spot trading was how he lived. He actually just buys chips now.
Wow.
Doesn't have a clue what they do. Doesn't have a clue what they do. Hasn't got no idea what the chip's for. Could be for making dog food container. Has no idea. But he'll just sit on it because he'll buy it 64 cents and know that someone's going to come along and say, I can't make my life support system or my drug injection system or my ICD device or my defibrillator without it. And that's what's happening. Yeah. So a lot of the price rise you're seeing is because other people are scalping in the industry. As well as that there is what happened was with the chip industry, we had a situation whereby when the pandemic started, people didn't know how long it's going on for. And so chip companies were having orders cancelled on them. And so they stopped. And there are these days very few foundries left in the world. And so as a result, people like Apple stepped in and occupied all of the capacity. And so suddenly people are now saying, well, I can't get the availability on the foundry, so I'm just not going to bother bringing that part back into. And we've got that situation with other parts where they've just gone end of life, or not even quoted end of life, but one started off with 10 weeks lead time, then 40 weeks lead time, then 90 weeks lead time. It's just, it's a very odd time. And that makes it interesting trying to run a company.
I can imagine.
Anyway, I'm crying, aren't I? Boo-hoo-hoo, sorry.
Well, I mean, if people have said about things like the PlayStation 5 and real things that are important in life, that these will continue to be scalped as long as people keep buying them for the inflated prices. Graphics cards as well is a massive problem. You can't upgrade your system, you can't run the latest games because you cannot buy the thing that you need to do it, at least not at a sensible price. Oh, it is a weird time. We've been hit by all sorts of strange things going on.
Alice, it's JR. We're going to wake up and it'll all have been a dream.
Yeah.
Or not.
Or not.
It is it's a really strange time. And I think everybody, doesn't matter what your business is, will be affected in some way by this chip industry behavior. And it's not going to go away. So yes, we have had to change a lot of things, both in terms of new products and also having to change the availability of other products, which has been an absolute nightmare. And you have to try and roll with the punches and keep up with it. But it's not funny. It's really not funny. And a lot of people don't understand it. They just read, it's a chip shortage, not necessarily understanding what's going on behind it. I spend a lot of my time each week trying to understand what the situation is with suppliers and key suppliers. And we're very grateful. We have some amazing suppliers we work with who've got, we've worked with for a long time, and that's why we do have stock of things like argons and cobalts. But it's an interesting time.
So, which brings us to then, what's next? What's coming up?
Well, we're going to launch right, no, the connection didn't die. We can't tell you what's next. We don't do vaporware. We only announce it when we're about to ship it.
That's a good thing. We like that. Yeah,
I
there
hate
are.
vape.
Yeah, there are a few notifications we get from certain companies that just drag out the whole thing, and we don't end up not really believing it anymore. So no, it's a good policy to
I'm
announce
not
when
going
you're
to forget.
shipping.
This year, we provided everything goes okay in supply chain, we'll launch more products than we've ever launched before.
Ooh,
In P2X02, we have, yeah. I mean, I know we can tell the secret. You may have one of our new thingies. Maybe. No, don't look at it. Don't look at it. I had to crop the camera so carefully, so I didn't actually reveal some stuff that's just there. Yeah, I think we have got some new stuff, and I hope people will like it. But there's some big new stuff for later on this year, which has taken us 3 years of development, which we're really excited about.
great.
But yeah, we don't like talking about stuff and then it's available in 6 months' time. I think it's just really awful. But yeah, you'll see. I hope continuation of what matters to Modal, which is making things that inspire you, making instruments that you want to play because they inspire you when you turn them on.
Yeah.
That's our hope. But so bigger and smaller and all shapes in between.
So hypothetically, what sort of synthesizer would you like to see released this year?
Do you watch The Simpsons?
I do, yes.
Do you remember the episode where Homer discovers he has a brother who makes cars?
Good Lord, no. Is that must
You've
be
never seen that?
recent? No, I don't think so.
Homer designs the Homer. I think that we could people. Maybe we're bad at marketing. We're a lot better since Christian joined us. But we launched the 002, and so everyone said, "Oh, they're a digital company." Well, then we launched the 008. But hang on, that's you can't do both.
Mm.
And we're not an anything company. We make something that's playable and fun to play and engages you and brings your creativity out. Whatever the technology is irrelevant. Do I think that means that we'll be spending all our money creating FM synths? Probably not, because if you really want to see an FM synth that's beautiful, buy a DX1. And the reason why the DX1 sounds so amazing is the incredible soundstage. And, it would be pretty hard to improve that, especially with its poly-AT keyboard.
There is one on Reverb at the moment that I saw posted on Facebook. I think it's going currently for 90,000.
Oh, no. Is that what they're going for now?
Yes.
Holy crap. I think I had two, and I think I paid about $1,000 for each one. They weren't very sought after.
No.
I wish I kept them. That's something I don't understand the rise. I got an email. There's a guy called Kevin Leitner, who is a really lovely guy, who is one of the best Roland techs in California, and I bought his System 700 from him, and I absolutely adored that instrument. And I think I bought the System 700 for $6, and I think I sold it for about. I think it went to the Chemical Brothers. I wasn't involved in it. It was somebody who handled the sale, but it went there for about, I don't know, 8,000 or something like that. I heard it was sold for $90,000 last year. I'm sorry, but is a synth really worth $90,000? I don't know.
I don't know.
Obviously, it is to the person who paid £90,000 for it. But I think that you can pick up a £300 Squier Strat, and it's a pretty damn good guitar. You can also pick up a £9,000 PRS or a £10,000 Fender Custom Shop, and it's also a stunning guitar. It's what it matters to the musician. What I hope we have is more instruments come out. We've never seen a time when there's so much new product coming out in the synth space. But it's got to be something that isn't constant menu diving and it's got to be immediate. It's got to be useful.
Yes.
It's got to be creative.
Yeah.
So what would I like to see coming out? I mean, the other great thing about what we do is we're not in an industry where you buy one of what we make. You have a situation where synth players will have, depending on their access to resources, and they may have 5 or 10 or 20 or whatever. It's not like we're competing for that one sale as you might do with, say, monitors or with audio interfaces. So we're in a situation whereby I hope people keep on coming out with really innovative, exciting instruments. That's what I hope.
Yeah.
And not clones of something that was made 40 years, or 30, 50 or whatever years ago. That to me, personally, I'd rather look at the future, not the past, personally.
No, that's cool. I mean, Roland are 50 this year, and they've hinted at interesting things on their release schedule this year, which could be interesting. And they've talked about it because Roland unashamedly are future looking, to the point where people go, stop it, we just want you to give us a 303 for God's sake, or something of that, along those sorts of lines. But they won't. Your man at the top of Roland is saying, look, the XM, the little Jupiter XM is the best thing I've ever produced. It's just superb. It has all these things. It does everything I've ever wanted any of my synths ever to do. And it's like, well, that's amazing. Go you, that's great. Just, go into the future and do that thing, because that's exciting. That's trying to find new ways of creating sound and new ways of interfacing with it, which is got to be the way forward.
I bought a JU06, and my it's cool. It's good fun. It's great. It's fun. And I bought it from I hope you won't mind me saying, Ian Brody from the Lightning Seeds. Just happened to buy it from. It was on eBay. It was called Brody Bod. I thought, that can't be the same Ian Brody was. So great. We that's the fun thing about what we do as an MI segment. People will use one of our sequential and Arturia and make something beautiful as a result. I think an album made with just modal synths would be really desperately boring. And I love the fact we live in this world. I mean, the new Casio synth that they announced earlier this week, I think it's a great idea. I really good fun if it means that a whole generation start producing albums with VRs and robots on. Wonderful. I think as long as we're trying, that's the main thing. And it is hard to make new tech in a world whereby we carry in our pockets computers that are more powerful than the Cray Ps that I used to work on in the 80s. It's tough to innovate that way. What we spend most of our time doing, looking, is this innovative? Is this unique? Is this something that's creative? Obviously, Roland lost a lot of their design team. That's really when Roland had a very bad time. A lot of those people left and went to ATV, and it's very hard when you lose a design team for a long time. It's very hard to recover from that. You could have said the same thing about Korg, for example. Korg went into a decline before Yamaha bought them, and then look at what happened when Yamaha invested and nurtured, and look at the Korg we have today.
Yeah. They can't go far wrong, so it seems that they seem incapable of making a mistake, which is a lovely position to put themselves in, I think. I think the interesting thing about the Casio, somebody else mentioned it in the chat, is that it reminded me of something. Because I mean, when we talk about the sort of the space that we're in, what I like about it is how everything is okay in terms of choices. We're in this kind of postmodern place where we feed on all sorts of different places, and we can hold different ideas out, whether it's virtual analog or real analog, whether it's knobs or menu diving to a certain degree. And we're able to put all these things together that we like and get the best out of it. And what the Casio remind me of is that when I was a kid, I learned to play. I had piano lessons, which I hated, but stuck at for a little bit. But what opened music up to me was my dad's Technics keyboard, a KN200.
Really good keyboards, and really well made. And
it was a one finger auto accompaniment, and I was playing Spanish Eyes, on the pan flute preset at the top, and I loved it. And it absolutely, I spent all my time on this thing. I gradually learnt whole 3-finger chords, over time, and learnt to read the music and the melodies and that sort of thing. And of course, this Casio reminds me exactly of that. And I'm suddenly thinking, why have I ignored this for so long? It's exactly the sort of thing my own kids would probably enjoy more than me. I keep trying to, here's an RD8, damn it, it's a drum machine, play with it. This is a 101, play with this. And they're going, well, whatever. But something like that responds so... brilliantly. Sorry?
I've got one of those with the same software installed. When the 16 is like,
Yeah, but that's the the sort of audio accompaniment you get, the sort of power and the noises you have in those machines are extraordinary these days. And of course we ignore them because we're into proper synthesizers.
I love the quote of Andy McCluskey, which is that the OMD started because his mum went and, I think it was Argos or Universal Stores or one of those at the time, and got him a Korg Mini Pops on £3 a week, and look at what happened. And he didn't have a Polyfusion 80 module modular to start with. They didn't have they made just great music. It was great. They went. And as he said, they went to go and see Kraftwerk, and it just they were a rock band. They went to go and see Kraftwerk. That's what we got to be, and that's what it doesn't matter what you play. I love, and for me, the Peter Gabriel 4, which is the album where he really used non-synthesized sounds, or sample sounds, to create very complex timbres and textures. That to me opened my mind and made up my mind about what I wanted in musical life. Okay, he was able to do that on a Fairlight, but Laurie Anderson was doing the tape loops, and so was Daphne Oram. It doesn't matter what you use. The great thing is the technology gets easier to use. It doesn't necessarily mean we become more creative with it, but that's the crucial thing, is as long as the technology enables the creativity, then we're doing the right thing. And it doesn't need to be elitist. It doesn't need to be a £4,000 instrument. Recently, we've done a lot of competitive analysis looking at the market, and you look at what is out there at $4,000 or $8,000, and you think, okay, how is that different from something else that might be out there for $2,000 or $1,500? And I think that at the end of the day, does it inspire you to sit down and make? And I keep on saying this, I'm being very boring. Does it inspire you to sit down and make a piece of music, as Steve Davis is inspired by his modular system? If it does, then it's a great thing.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I think there's a lot of collector vibe out there. People who collect synthesizers. It's become a little bit of a hobby at the higher end of things. But the rest of us, I mean, we have such choice. It's extraordinary.
It's been in the guitar industry the same for 50 years. I mean, there's a joke that people call PRS guitars, dentist guitars. And what they mean by that is that this is a US joke. So a dentist guitar is one that someone who's in a well-earning professional career buys a guitar for $4,000 and puts it on the wall behind him. And anyone who's had a Zoom conference with me know I've got a few on the wall there. But I think if we made racing cars, or if we made snooker cues, the ability to afford doesn't necessarily mean your creativity is controlled. And Andy McCluskey's mum, buying him a Korg Mini Pops at £3 a week on that's what made OMD and some damn fine music. That one I always come back to. It always reminds me, just keep grounded.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's awesome. I mean, we're heading towards that bloody 2-hour mark again. I can't believe we keep doing these 2-hour streams. Yeah, it's 10.
We've been on that long.
It's 10
I do
to 9.
apologise for the one person who must still be listening.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's just what happens. We get talking about these things, and it just it manages to keep going, which is great. It's ace. It's good telly. That's what I think. Well, I think it is.
It's the of Dallas and discovering we're all in a drought.
Yeah,
it's great fun. I love talking synths. I hope that's come across. We love what we do. Everyone in the company does this because we could go and make 10 times more money designing missile control systems or speed camera image recognition. We want to make musical instruments. That's what we do, and it's lovely to have the chance to talk about it. So thank you very much for the invitation and for giving me the time. And thanks for everyone who's listened in. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome, mate. That's been great. It's always good to see behind the veil of these manufacturers, because you are mysterious most of the time, and probably rightly so.
We just crap at communicating.
That's it. You're just getting on with your job, and that's important. And so every now and again, giving you a poke, I think that's a positive thing. That's why things like Superbooth, Synthfest are so great, because you all knock around and you actually get to talk to people mostly. I mean, there are the other big three. You don't ever talk to Mr. Yamaha or Mr. Korg or, that kind of thing. But by and large, you get to talk to the people behind the gear, and that's an amazing thing.
I was reading a review by Mike Beecher, who is the founder of ELMM, where he interviewed Rick Wakeman on the album 1984 in 1981. And Rick said that he'd gone to this little company that was just starting up called Korg, and had ordered a couple of instruments because they were really cool. Everyone starts off somewhere, and it's about remembering where you came from. So Korg, they were just a couple of guys, 4 guys who decided to go and each put their name in with a letter in the name and a KEIO. But in terms of where you come from, people like Yamaha, I hope they come back and produce something innovative. I still remember the excitement when the DX7 came out. But I think this industry is kept alive by some really interesting people with some real energy. They produce some stuff that goes, maybe isn't a mega hit, but everyone's trying, and that's what I love about this industry. There's a lot of energy in this space of what we do. So it's I wake up lucky every morning to do what I do.
Awesome. Well, we all enjoy it. I mean, I think the amount of output that is pouring onto Facebook groups and places like that is just extraordinary. The fact that we have a system by which people can publish their music and videos just straight out there without having to worry about anybody else sitting in between it is amazing. And of course it creates a whole load of rubbish, but it also creates, or it puts forward people's thoughts and emotions and ideas through just what they're doing and what they're playing. And I think it's Modal are an amazing enabler of that, and that's why we need to support our manufacturers in getting these things right. So cool.
We're very grateful. We try and get it right. Are we still in Bristol? We're all over the place now. Yes, most of the people in the team are in Bristol. We don't have a physical office anymore because our lease came up during COVID. And they wanted us to accept some ridiculous new lease, and we were like, we can't go into the office. Why should we? We basically, the majority of the team is still in Bristol, but we have people now in Amsterdam, we have people in Spain, we have people in America. We are mostly in Bristol is the best way of putting it. Just to answer your question.
Great. Well, shall we knock it on the head then? So I think we'll call that a day. Thanks ever so much for, hang on, what I'll do, I'll go big again. And thanks ever so much for that, Philip. That was great.
Nice to see you all. Keep safe.
Yeah. Stay on the line. I'll speak to you in just a second. I'll just tell people what's going on next and close this stream down. So there we go. That was Modal Electronics. That was awesome. I enjoyed kicking back with that. So what do we have left? Well, I have no guests left, sadly. I just have myself. So it will just be me for the next couple of things. What we have coming up tomorrow is part 2 of the Erica Synths VCO build. I don't know if any of you saw, but I had a go at it on Monday, just trying to work through the next step on the breadboard on my impossibly crowded breadboard, not knowing quite what I'm doing. And it's quite a struggle, but it's an interesting one. So on tomorrow night, I'll try to get it to the stage where we can just look at it finally on the breadboard and then move to soldering and talk about what on earth is going on in there. It's an extraordinary learning experience. So that's tomorrow night, the Erica Synths VCO. Then Thursday night, I'm still planning on doing a spot at the open mic night in Gringos in Norwich. Sorry, it just makes me laugh every time I say that because there's no way it's going to work. How is it going to work? Well, anyway, I'm going to attempt to live stream that down my phone over the internet from Norwich. I haven't even done the patch yet. It's sitting in pieces over there. I've got to put the bloody rack together. So that's my task for Thursday, is to make all of that happen. And the Thursday night I should be live streaming about 9 o'clock. So that'll be fun. If not, then I'm not doing anything this Friday anymore because on the ProSynth Network, on their channel, they're actually speaking to Martin Ware, and I thought I didn't want to clash with that. So I've bumped my Friday night end of stream parties to Sunday. So we'll do that on Sunday night, 8 o'clock. And I'm in the process of editing down the Molten Music Monthly, which should be out tomorrow, and we can talk about that too. So that is everything. That takes us to the end of this live stream bonanza, which has been fun for me, if exhausting. So that's cool. Thanks very much for turning up, for watching, for contributing, for asking questions. And I'll see you soon. In the meantime, go and make some tunes. God damn it. One of these days I'm going to seamlessly press that outro button. There it is.